Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to what will be the first of many online presentations this year, a combination between NOSP, Norwegian Forum for Offshore Survey and Positioning, and the Hydrographic Society of Scotland. This is our 6th online event. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing COVID situation, it does look like we will be online all year, but we will endeavour to put together some entertaining presentations for you. I think that tonight's is going to be a great start to the year, and we're in the process of putting further ones together. So at the moment, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone concerned, everyone who's joined in. I think we're about 20 odd people at the moment, and if you know any of your friends in lockdown who are interested in some of the subjects we're going to talk about, give them a quick ring, text them, let them know that we're going live now. And and hopefully we can have an entertaining evening discussing photogrammetry and manning projects. So, like I say, thank you very much to, first and foremost, to our sponsors, without which we could not do this. Those are on your screen at the moment. And of course, for this year, we are looking for further sponsorship because of the reduced in-person meetings that we are having. We have reduced the sponsorship is half price. So if there are any companies watching that are interested in getting their logo up on not just this screen and getting involved in online events, but also on the website as well, please get in touch with myself or Selena, and we will endeavour to. We would be very much appreciative of your time. During the evening, I would encourage you to engage in some chat. That is being hosted on Discord, so please go to the website and you will find the website. You'll find the link for that. So ask questions. Selena is producing that in the background, and she will be feeding me the questions, and I will be asking them to the guys who are presenting. So please don't be shy. Come forward with any questions. No questions are ever stupid. These are all the most likely to be lots of new subjects and informative in many ways. So this is an opportunity to get right into the depths and ask also some of the people who were instrumental in bringing this technology to the fore and to the marketplace. So ask these questions and don't be shy. We are, of course, as we go through the year, looking for any presenters. We obviously like to have some sort of running theme for some of the evenings, but if that's not the case, it's not a problem. What we're most interested in is just hearing from people who are interested in talking, and I've got something interesting to say. So please, as I say, get in contact, either myself or Selena or anyone from Simon and Nikki in the Hydrographic Society in Scotland. I imagine that we will be combining our efforts again this year. So all of us are happy to receive proposed topics for discussion. So on this evening's event, the 6th online event we've had, we have 3 very interesting topics to discuss. First, and up shortly will be Peter Simpkins, someone I've known through his sons and his company for the better part of 15 years. And he will be shortly discussing his life, I suppose, for want of a better term, up to the present day, and from Oceanfix as it was and as I knew it many years ago through RPS, and then back now to Oceanfix. And I've had the pleasure of working with Peter for the last 6 months, and it is exactly as I said, it is a pleasure working with him. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Peter and his take on Oceanfix Limited and why he is here. Welcome, Peter. This is your opportunity to tell the world about Oceanfix and now Oceanfix. So I will leave the floor with you and look forward to hearing the story.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm still not quite sure how I managed to let Stuart convince me that giving this talk was a good idea and an interesting subject, but here we are. Unfortunately, many of the slides which I would have illustrated on this talk, I was unable to convert to a usable slide format. The medium was negative in slides, so my pictures are more limited than I would have liked. The title of the talk, whilst cryptic, sums up what must be going through a lot of people's minds at the moment. Why would someone who's worked hard to retirement age and very much enjoyed their retirement, sailing all over Scandinavia, the UK and Europe, then decide to come back into the industry at a time when the industry is in a very parlous state? Chronic logistic problems, low oil price, and the cancellation of projects on a grand scale. And then to take on the arduous task and responsibility of setting up a new company and starting all over again. Well, you may well ask this question, but to answer it for you, I must of necessity go back in time to try and explain the mindset of the man, my team, and the company, and its employees, who all became part of that team. In addition, you will have to, excuse me, I'm still, oh, Lordy be, yeah. Bear with me, my screen is not moving. Right, to answer for you, I must necessity go back, okay? In addition, you will have to humor me and listen to what some, the older members of this illustrious audience, will find old hat, as they say, as they all wear the same t-shirt in one form or another. Although, I think I still have a few good years on most of them. But to some of those not so long in the tooth, maybe, just maybe, this will be of some interest, as it touches on what is to some way a very small part of the history of this industry. Today, we live in a plug-and-play environment with every protocol catered for and off-the-shelf software that caters for our every need and solves many, if not all, of our day-to-day survey problems. So I'll take you back in time to when none of this existed, and we literally flew by the seat of our pants. It was extremely demanding, but very exciting. And in general, the working days were very long. God, why don't this damn thing work? To start at the beginning, perhaps I should start by telling you how I came to be in this industry after having started my working life as a deck officer in the Merchant Navy with a top drawer British company called British India, and how and why I went on to jointly establish the hydrographic survey company Oceanfix International. The first ship you see here is a general cargo ship. The second is a passenger cargo ship, an unusual type of vessel. We shipped cargo from India and Pakistan. Journey, we would ship dates and the return passengers. There were 4 decks of passengers and a galley on each deck. If you like Asian food, as I do, it was amazing. At this stage, my working life and tools of the trade were nothing more than the sextant for taking vertical angles, and there you can see my trusty sextant, of the sun and stars, working out position lines and star sites with the relevant almanac information. The means of navigation at that time were the same as they had been for centuries, apart from the advent of gyros and Loran and Decca Navigator, although the magnetic compass was still being used on some vessels. Most of my service time was spent in areas of the world not endowed with Decca or Loran, and some of the vessels were not even fitted with a gyro. In addition, your vessel had to be equipped with the special Decca charts, which were produced with the hyperbole printed on them. Unlike positioning systems of today, they did not output a coordinate or a Latin long. You had to manually plot the hyperbolic lane you were in and from one station, and then use the other two stations and thereby produce a fix, which you plotted on the chart. Coastal navigation was carried out with the bridge wing compasses, one on each wing, and an azimuth circle. This enabled us to take bearings of shoreside features, usually headlands, navigation lights, lighthouses, but sometimes in some of the more remote areas where there were no such mod cons, we used the Admiralty Pilot Book, written long ago, and identified features ashore that the erstwhile ancient mariners had sketched out in the pilot book. A particular shaped bluff in the background was an example, or a mountaintop. These bearings were then laid off on the paper charts. The error of the compass was computed by taking bearings of the sun and the moon and the stars, and the true azimuth computed. We were out of sight. When you were out of sight of land, we used the sextant to take angles of the sun or the stars, depending on what was available. Patience was a requirement, as often you had to wait for the cloud cover to clear and to see the celestial bodies that you wished to take an angle of. And the position lines were then computed and again plotted on the chart. I traveled all over the world and saw at that time much that was completely unknown to the average man in the street back in the UK, as there was at that time no such thing as cheap travel. And apart from the intrepid overland explorers, who you can never tie down, and the early land oil industry surveyors, few people went anywhere else but Europe. However, sometime in my early 20s, I was involved in a near fatal accident, which effectively terminated my deck officer career. So I had to pick up the pieces and get on with life. So I went back to university and enlisted in the hydrographic survey course that was being planned after I'd completed my Master's Certificate of Competency. This course was to be the very first civil hydrographic course in the UK and possibly in the world. Hydrographic surveys courses were at that time only done by the military in certain countries around the world. The course was set up at Plymouth Polytechnic alongside the School of Navigation. There were 7 of us on that course, and to be flippant, we had a ball as it was such an interesting course. And with only 7 students, the student-teacher ratio was brilliant. You could not but enjoyable. It was at this stage, and subsequently, when I started work again, that I started to use the sextant in the horizontal mode. In those days, there were really only 4 types of long-range survey navigation system: Hyperfix, MaxiRan, Loran, and later Pulsate. All of them were more suited to being installed on dedicated vessels that were set up for a particular application like seismic or site surveys. There were also short-range systems like Mini Ranger and Telerometer. Transit satellite was in use, but it was in its infancy and mainly used on land survey, ashore, or on rig moves. Using the 2 meg long-range systems like Hyperfix brought their own issues, as at dusk and dawn you would get lane slip and the mechanical dials would whiz around alarmingly. I had little to do with these systems by nature of the work that I was involved in, but I have a good friend who is the same age as me who used them extensively. He tells me he used to count the lanes out when he started a job so that he could recover his position in the event of lane slip, as it was called. He remembers well listening on the VHF to two surveyors talking. One was saying he was sure he was in the right position, but by the plaintive tone in his voice, you could tell he wasn't. Alas, this could happen to anyone using these systems. We used to laugh about it at the time and say that Decker engineers came with extra large ears to listen out for the whir of the mechanical counters running amok. The type of work I was involved in initially was not so sophisticated. It was pipeline construction work, operating from lay barges and heavy lift barges. I had only my sextant, a calculator, and a basic master and remote telerometer system. This gave me my baseline distance between two platforms, and my sextant allowed me to calculate the offset. All very crude, but we managed. My employer used to hire me out to various clients that had survey-related issues. You've got to bear in mind that at that time, there were few hydrographic surveyors outside of Decker or Guardline. I would have to jump in a chopper or a supply boat and travel to another vessel, then meet with the barge superintendent or vessel manager, find out what the problem was, and then sort out the problem. It might be positioning a topside on top of piles, or just moving a vessel into position and running the anchors. I then used to have to travel back to my barge and carry on my day job. You have to bear in mind that at that time, the upper echelons of the industry offshore, which was barge superintendents and foreman, was dominated by Americans in the oil industry offshore. They were real cowboys and wore cowboy hats and cowboy boots and were just as gung-ho as the image conjures up. It was thrilling work, but arduous work, often 20 hours a day. My food was often brought to me on the bridge, and I catnapped on a bunk on the control tower bridge. I was the sole surveyor on the barge in those days, both towmaster for anchor deployment and surveyor for positioning work. It was a very unhealthy working environment, as after my 30 days offshore, I was very tired. But I can truly say I enjoyed those days enormously. Later, I was employed by an Italian company, Subsea Oil Services SPA, to help them navigate manned submarines and assist with diving operations using Pulsate and a Kongsberg USBL acoustic tracking system, which at that time was just coming in to the industry. Later, an ATNAV system, low frequency acoustic LBL system, was integrated into the setup. The computer at the time that was running this survey spread was a PDP 1105. It loaded the program with a ticker tape, and can you imagine it? It took 1 hour and 20 minutes to load the whole program, a staggeringly long time to sit and wait when you have a vessel dive superintendent tearing his hair out and cursing every surveyor under the sun to hell and damnation. But alas, there wasn't an awful lot one could do but sit and wait and listen to the ticker tape machine go dugga 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 dugga. This slide you're looking at is the lower part of it is the PDP 1105, in the middle is the ATDAV, and on top is an RDF unit. When I initially started work on the company's diving support vessel Capalonga, she had 8 anchors and changeable pennants. So we were kept very busy guiding the anchor handling tugs and positioning the anchors as we moved along. After this, I went to Papua New Guinea as the Marine Officer Hydrography, where most of what I did was inshore survey using dual sextants and starring with sextants in mangrove swamps, plus installing a network of tidal stations around Papua New Guinea. This last exercise was frustrated by the Papuans' amoral view on property. If they thought the counterweights were useful, they would just remove them. I knew how to resolve this issue, but unfortunately, the government of Papua New Guinea would not at that time pay the village head man a fee to act as my tide gauge protector. Later, Capalonga went to dry dock in Holland, and I returned to help Ian with the survey elements of the conversion, whilst the vessel was converted to the first large DP vessel in the North Sea. We were supplied with the very latest in single point positioning for DP, Artemis and taut wire. And there you can see in the slide the Artemis system installed on a platform. The taut wire was integral to the vessel, but we surveyors had to fly all over the place to install Artemis systems on known points on platforms and then RO on a distant object. This was a very pleasant interlude for us, as the food on the platforms was of a considerably better standard than what we were being fed on Capalonga. Although being an Italian Yugoslav vessel, we did have the unusual luxury of being served wine with our meal. Yes, very different times indeed. There you can see a picture of Capalonga in all her glory. And there you can see the manned submarine being launched. We had frequent power blackouts and lost many working hours reloading the PDP 1105 after every blackout. It was costing the client a veritable fortune in downtime. This was before the advent of the first oil industry downturn, when day rates for a vessel like Capalonga were truly astronomical. In those days, the only systems that were protected by a UPS battery supply was the DP system. This perhaps was what focused my interest in trying to improve our activity by trying to improve the systems that we were working with, an ambition that still drives me today. We know that there were better ways to handle the navigation with more current computers. But there was in those days no off-the-shelf software that you could go out and buy like today's Eva or Quincy and others. Our employers, they just had cloth ears and to this kind of problem. They were making enough money despite the vessel downtime, and they wouldn't invest in the necessary software and hardware for our little department. At the time, I was working with Ian Murray and Jeff Knowles on a 30-day rota. Ian later went to work for BP very successfully, but Jeff and I decided to start a company, buy the necessary hardware, and we commissioned Peter Golding to write the necessary software to our specification. Pete at that time was one of the leading software developers in the industry. Our employers were very happy with this arrangement, and as this approach, they risked nothing but started to see the advantage for their operation. And that was the start of Oceanfix International. Initially, I worked offshore on one vessel and Jeff worked on another. down in the Mediterranean. We later employed Peter Dawkins and Peter Downes at a later date, and this set the stage for what was an extremely successful working relationship. Peter Downes had been a computer systems engineer on Capalonga. Oh, gosh, damn it. As I mentioned before, the era was not a plug-and-play era. You had to have protocol converters between your computer and the navigation systems, the gyros, the echo sounders being used on the job. This very much limited the integration of survey suites at that stage, but Peter Downes was a gifted engineer, and we were able to design, build, and utilize our own protocol converters for whatever bit of kit we needed to deploy. We very early on were able to fully integrate our survey suites, a groundbreaking achievement at that time. We got even more ambitious with our appetite for innovation, as part of our remit was video editing after the submarine had collected miles and miles of pipeline video data. It was mind-numbing work and was very labor-intensive. Plus, it was on top of our survey work. It required many additional hours of labor. And when everyone else was lying around idle during frequent bouts of bad weather, we surveyors were beavering away on the video review with the vessels bucking and gyrating. Capalonga had an awful motion in a heavy weather. This was not an enviable task. So we brainstormed our way out of this situation, and Pete Downes designed and built what at that time must have been a very first video overlay unit. As a result, we were able, via our black box of tricks, to put survey data down the umbilical and onto the video recorders. One of our big mistakes at that time was that we thought we were being clever by keeping this to ourselves instead of commercial marketing it for profit. Inevitably, others saw what we were doing and developed similar units and commercialized for profit. But again, we leapt ahead, and working with Osprey cameras, we developed a surface unit and a tiny board to fit into the Osprey cameras that allowed survey data to be inserted onto cameras fitted to the ROVs on the seabed, again, breaking ground. Later, we were installed on the Shell Stay Dive semi-submersible, which you see in the slide, as the positioning contractor, a contract we held for some 10 years. Initially, the spread was purely a surface positioning spread, and when required, we worked with Sonodyne LBL systems for accurate ROV and diver positioning. But the ROV 225 used to rove around without any means of navigation, as in those days, the only types of acoustic beacons fitted to ROVs were responders. They were hardwired to the vehicle's umbilical system, and the command activated from the surface via the cable. This was fine for the large ROVs, as the umbilical had the necessary spare conductors. But the small ROV 225 did not have spare conductors, so a responder could not be fitted. We looked at this problem, and after an in-depth study of Stay Dive's DP system, we worked out that there was data available on the DP test channels that we could use to navigate the vehicle using a mini pinger. No one, to my knowledge, at that time was doing this at this stage. But first, we had to convince the powers that be that we could be 100% sure we would be able to guarantee the integrity of the Stay Dive's DP system, that it would not be compromised. And that was where the brilliance of Peter Downes once again came to the fore. He designed a black box that was heavily insulated to prevent any possibility of shorting of the electronics, as we had to insert this box into the DP gubbins. Plus, he designed it in such a way that we could only receive data. Nothing was to go back down the line. This development was a major success, and we were able to navigate the 225 ROV for the first time. It really opened up how it could be utilized. This type of development spurred on our desire to improve methods and keep on improving our systems and methodology. During this period, we were also dealing with Sonodyne equipment and Sonodyne themselves, Nigel Kelland in particular. We developed a very good working relationship with Sonodyne, and actually for a while acted as part of their survey arm when they secured work for their innovative, intelligent acoustic system. One project I well remember was the Mari Rose project, which Jeff spent a good deal of time on. Sonodyne at that stage made a move to try and absorb Oceanfix into their organization. But for us, the thought of going back into an employment situation hampered by a board that approved budgets, and if we had a worthwhile idea, would we get it through? This didn't appeal to us as directors at the time. Jeff, however, did go on to form a very close relationship with them. However, it wasn't just offshore activity we were looking at. Let me just move a slide on. Other development that is worth talking about is ground probing radar. GPR was initially developed during the Vietnam War by the Americans, but further development had not moved forward much at all since then. I could see the possibilities of GPR, so I jumped on a plane and went to America and met with the manufacturer. I then did an intensive course in ground probing radar, bought all the necessary equipment and flew back to the UK. I handed it over to Pete Downs, who ripped it apart to study how we could enhance the collection and presentation of the data. As at that time, as you can see in the slide, the data was recorded only on a carbon paper trace. Very messy and of very limited use. Peter then developed a color display and a digital recording device, which at that time allowed us to present a terrain model and the GPR data corresponding to that terrain model. By today's standards, quite crude, but we are talking about 30 odd years ago. So really quite a feat of engineering. This had huge advantages for us and allowed us to service a really wide variety of clients. The military, where we searched for World War II munitions. This was very early UXO work, and I've many amusing stories to tell of those experiences, and some small collection of cannonballs and musket rounds. We searched also for mustard gas canisters and other buried ordnance. Our system was able to work in areas where there was a high ferrous content in the surroundings, like steel buildings, fences, building sites with the red brick in the ground, as the Army's Forster could not get too close to this type of medium without loss of sensitivity. The police frequently called on us to find stashes of arms and dead bodies. Archaeologists, they called on us to map out sites before excavation. Alas, a lot of that work was unfunded, but highly interesting. And finally, the biggest market of all was the civil engineering market. Even then, I had in my mind, how we were going to incorporate all our GPR, EM, topographic and resistivity data into one presentation, one huge data set. But alas, at that stage, available software was very basic, so it remained a dream for me. Now that I've returned, I can see how all this has come about in packages of today. There are a lot of prospects on the horizon. It was these types of development that spurred on our desire to improve methods and keep on improving our systems and methodology. I will not bore you further with details, as I've only mentioned the previous information to shine a light on the individual and corporate philosophy of the company and what we were trying to achieve with the team at Oceanfix, and to demonstrate that ours is an industry which provides plenty of opportunity for innovation and which can still benefit from it, especially with the increasing focus on efficient data management and autonomous operations. During my time running Oceanfix, the company grew year on year, and we expanded our remit into many different sectors of the industry, mostly at low key levels, such that many people had no concept of the size and reach of Oceanfix. To achieve this level of commitment required dedication and a lot of long days. I well remember one long night I was still working away at 2 o'clock in the morning on a tender when an email landed on my desktop. It was sent by one of our data processors who was on night shift and had sent an email so that I could deal with it in the morning. Well, I was there, so I answered it promptly. I still laugh about her reply in huge letters, "Get a life, Pete." I spoke with her recently and she too remembers saying it. All very funny. Whilst writing up my notes for this talk, my wife also reminded me of something she said at the time when we first started the company and all of us were working crazy hours, day in, day out, week in, week out. She said, "When am I going to see something of you?" I replied, not to worry, it will take a couple of years and we'll have everything running smoothly and I'll be able to ease up. Well, let me tell you people, it does not work that way. And you are as busy as we were in those days. Sadly, I was reminded that I had chalked up 13 weeks leave in 38 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not use my example. It's not a good work-life balance. Unfortunately, there is a very sad element to this point I'm making. I've always said hard work never killed anyone, but alas, stress does. And much of what we were doing was very stressful, as new developments and untried ideas that go offshore can have catastrophic fallout if things do not go the way they should. Fortunately, we never had any incidents like that, but the wear and tear on my fellow directors was very detrimental. And both Peter Downs and Peter Dawkins, who you see in this slide, very sadly died early in years, and I was left to run the organization alone for quite a while. It's interesting to note at this point that when we had been running the company for some time and the three of us were talking to our financial advisor around the table, much as you see in the slide, discussing pensions and key man insurances, I think, he commented that statistically, by the time we reached retirement age, out of the three of us, only one would likely be left standing. A very sobering and haunting prophecy that sadly came very true. Fortunately for me and Oceanfix, later on, both Tasman and Reese, my two sons, and daughter Kylie joined the company, all with a strong work ethic, and we were able to carry on and continue to build the company. Everything that had happened to get Oceanfix where it was all part and parcel of very good and harmonious team effort, both with my staff and especially with all the consultants and some contractors who aligned themselves with us at that time. And without that relationship and trust, little of this would have happened. And in all that, I personally have been very fortunate. On another point regarding my early company years, it is true to say we were all very enthusiastic surveyors and engineers, but as real businessmen, we were not so gifted. We were very guilty of being work and project orientated. We had our hands full, just keeping the juggernaut running. We didn't pay the right amount of attention to our poor cash flow situation, and our invoicing department was not great either. There was just not enough supervision in that area. We trusted it was all running smoothly. So long as we got to the end of the year with a decent profit, all was well. Well, I'll say this now and quite clearly. This was not the way to run a company. And we realized this when we looked closely at the amount of money we were paying the bank and in interest and how much credit we were giving our clients. Remember this, unless you get the cash into the company, you're failing the business itself. It is your money after all, if the client is holding on to it, as you have already earned that money. It was at that stage we became 100% family business, as I employed my wife as the company's credit controller, a job she did very, very well, bringing our bank account back into the black inside of 3 months. A very substantial amount of money. One of my one of my clients at that time coined the phrase Rottweiler and asked me on several occasions to please call off your Rottweiler. We still chuckle about that, and interestingly, he and I have had communication about this point quite recently, as he also had the same cash flow issues when he started his own company. Getting cash into the company can be hard work. Alas, it is also a common problem. Fortunately, I can say that later on that was one very good thing that the Labour government of the time went some way to alleviate with the introduction of new laws on payment terms and legal requirements to pay interest and penalties. In addition, the Royal Bank of Scotland actually used the turnaround of our cash flow situation as part of a lecture to the RBS managers on the value of credit control. But I will give you this advice to any budding entrepreneurs in the audience. Your credit controller is a hugely important part of your organization if they're doing their job well. They must be patient, diligent, and relentless. So why did I sell the company? Well, in 2007, in this country, we had been under a Labour government for a number of years. And we, as a company, had seen a number of anti-business moves made at that time. And with Gordon Brown taking the reins at number 10, he was going to bring in some more very punitive fiscal policies. My friend Chris Chait of Chait & Co., who at that time was a successful operator in the field of mergers and acquisitions, explained to me that as a consequence, considerable taxation changes would be incurred after April the 4th, 2008. I had, up until that point, not considered retirement. I thought I would soldier on until I too fell over in the harness. But this sobering bit of financial warning brought me up short, and I made a quick decision that we would retire prior to the 2008 period and go and do something that I've always planned over 40 years I would do. I would go sailing as and when I wished, with no timetable to hinder me. So that is what happened, and the sale of the company went through very quickly. As our construction-related experience was much sought after by the eventual purchaser of the company. I did not retire fully until March 2010, as I was required to hand over the reins in a 2-year phase. Year 1, full-time, and year 2 as a consultant if required. The boys knew their onions, so I was not required at all in that 2nd year, and I was able to spend 6 months in Sweden at the small Naiad boat yard while we specified the boat, and I worked in the yard and saw that everything went smoothly. It was a really interesting and informative and eye-opening, seeing all the techniques used to build a boat. It was a very enjoyable 6 months. I learned everything there is to know about a boat and the systems being installed. Shirley and I then retired, 100% enjoyed sailing in the Baltic for 4 years, and finally we set sail up the coast of Norway to meet up with my old friend at Lafroyen in Kalvar. Something I had always said I would do, and now I could fulfill my promise and tie up on the quay outside the very nice little restaurant in Kalvar. The coast of Norway and the fjords are truly mind-boggling and very humbling to sail up. You really do get an impression of how truly insignificant we are when we're held up against a spectacle like that. The places we visited in this part of the world are a sailor's paradise, as the hospitality of the Norwegians we met was legion and heartwarming, and I have many anecdotes which would leave you chuckling with a big smile on your face. When the weather was clement, it was paradise, and harsh when it was inclement. Some of the very remote spots we stayed at, we found such pleasant people and lovely places to moor, like on one occasion a private house owner with his own jetty, who let us stay alongside his jetty whilst his sons went out and caught us fish for supper. I seem to recall we traded that for chocolates. We sailed through the summer until the autumn of 2019, looking into every bolt hole that we could find along the way. We were not passage making, we were exploring, and very enjoyable it was too. However, at the end of 2019, we'd just started to see the start of this terrible pandemic, COVID-19. We tied the boat up, covered it up, and returned to the UK. At that stage, I never thought it would be possible that it would be several years before I got back to see Red Roo, and we're not there yet. We returned to our house in Scotland and sat twiddling our thumbs as the situation got worse and worse and lockdowns more severe. I could clearly see that COVID was having a very detrimental effect on the industry, and in particular, the sector where we had been operating. This was having a huge effect on the legacy business of Oceanfix. I watched with no small amount of concern as I saw the staff of RPS Oceanfix first get furloughed in stages, then as the pandemic intensified, more personnel were laid off, until finally, in the summer of 2020, the whole of the Aberdeen survey team were made redundant. At first, I looked at this situation with a pretty sanguine point of view. Maybe it was inevitable. But then I realized how much would be lost if I stood back and did nothing. All the years that had gone into building a well-oiled machine like Oceanfix, all the expertise that would be lost, those long-term relationships with consultants and subcontractors, and a service that their clients had come to rely on. And frankly, to me, more importantly, a legacy would crash and burn in flames. So I quickly reincorporated as Oceanfix International and employed all of the staff that I could who were not restricted in their employment terms. Fleshed out a plan with lawyers, accountants, and skilled 3D parties who would help me get a company up and running as quickly as possible and prevent a long break in operations, which would have allowed the company's market share to slip away and thus ensuring for some clients a pretty seamless transition from one organization to another. Hopefully, in the eyes of these clients, we've achieved this goal. I purchased all the necessary and very latest survey equipment and software and got back to work. It was back into harness big time. Long days and a lot of talking and typing. It's great to be back, and I really enjoy the interaction with all the personnel I deal with. But behind all that is my desire to push on and to produce a product even better than we had before, encompassing all of the latest relevant technologies that we can harness and to broaden our company portfolio, such that the earlier simplistic model left behind and replaced by a more forward-looking model, more useful to our client, less of a product that they only need out of necessity, and more of a product that they want because they can see how it will enhance their own operation. In truth, much of what we'll do in the short term is the tried and tested model, as it takes time to build things up. But we have plans to launch into several value-added areas that will enhance our usefulness to our client. Our dimensional survey department is a top-door service, as we need to survive on our reputation. We'll push forward developing this service and integrating new technologies to enhance the product for the client. Our overriding ethos is delivery awareness. Our sense of the value of presentation is very important. What the client wants, the client gets. The easier, the more complete, and the more useful that data is to the client, the more they will want it, and we in turn will benefit. In addition, on my return to the industry, I could see quite clearly that the supply chain format has changed out of all recognition. It is also impersonal now when dealing with the large clients. Gone is the personal interface when dealing with new clients. It's all portals, invitations, and electronic interfaces. Great for some in the industry, but not for me. That's an anathema. What we would like to deploy is the personal touch when dealing with those clients that we do end up working with, such that there's an interface and we, as a company, will know exactly where we stand, right or wrong, and we can thus keep on improving our product. And to sum up, many of my friends and older colleagues thought I was stark raving mad to leave what was an enjoyable and comfortable retirement to plunge back into the cut and thrust of business life. Maybe they were right in some ways, but it's a labor of love and a passion and a duty all rolled into one as far as I see it. I could not just walk away from the devastation. So here I am, and here we all are. As a company, the team is growing steadily, so the we is getting bigger all the time. Soon, very soon, we'll all be back where I left off, but this time with younger hands on the reins to take us forward with all their new ideas. Our motto going forward is innovate to invigorate. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know what to say, Peter. Our schedule has completely gone out the window, but I enjoyed every second of that. It was it was everything I wanted it to be, and everything. I've learned so much from just listening to you, and I also think it's extremely important that maybe some of our younger viewers get an idea of where we all came from, because even I can hark back to and hanker back to some of what you were talking about there. But I think also very informative, very personal as well. The ups and downs of what's happened with COVID and your path through life. I think that was absolutely fascinating. I just hope you were reading from your autobiography, because we have in the region of upwards of over 100 people looking at this at the moment, and I don't think we've had that amount. So you'd be able to sell your autobiography. I would certainly be the first person in the bookshop to buy that. But I really appreciate the time that you've taken, and I hope everyone found that very informative. I have a number of questions, but I'll probably just stick to the one so that we probably move on to the next presenters. But how do you see the industry? You've obviously taken a little bit of time to map it out. You mentioned it briefly, but how do you see the industry changing over the next 10 years then? I mean, yeah, it's a very large question. It's a
very large question, but I think certainly there's a lot more of the remote work, I think, will affect us. I think that's an inevitable something on the horizon.
Yeah.
The sophistication of software is just radicalizing everything we do.
Correct. Yeah, I think the remote aspect is on everybody's lips at the moment. It certainly will be.
That will be a huge part of the change. Yeah. Absolutely.
But certainly it was something that will be coming on into the next one. I know that there are a lot of people asking questions on the Discord forum, so probably some old friends by the sounds of it over there. I'm there telling each other stories about their experiences many years ago in the Deca days. So I would encourage you, Peter, to continue from here and go and have a chat to some old friends there. So on that note, I would like to say a massive thank you, because I thought that was just a great way to start the year as well. A general overview of where we are. So yeah, I thank you very much for your time, and now we will bring in Richard Drennan from Viewpoint 3.
Hello there, how you doing?
Hello, Richard. Very much. Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. A little bit about yourself. I think you're. I only first got in touch with you a couple of weeks ago for some work that we were looking to do here in DOF. But you're Aberdonian, and you started Viewport 3, as I understand it, about 5 years ago.
Just coming up for 4.
Just coming up for 4, and it was interesting when you sent me your bio, because you mentioned that you'd collaborated with a guy called Chris out of an incubator, which I had a little bit of experience with over here in Norway. But that goes to show what can come out of those sorts of local business events. And I think that's also very important for some of the younger people who are trying to get into the industry, hopefully listening here, that it does pay to meet the right people, and that was an opportunity that paid a lot of dividends for you. So.
Yeah, I think that something like that should be a prerequisite for people starting their businesses. Hugely helpful. Recommend it to all.
Absolutely. I think there was a boom in that a few years ago. I was involved in it, and it was a very informative period. So on that note, I will give you the floor and look forward to your presentation, which I think is a good kind of connection between what we've just heard from Peter. Really, he mentioned dimensional control. Just look at the accuracy at some of the work he was doing, and now look at some of the accuracy of the work we're doing, you're doing, especially subsea. So it's just a paradigm change of technology here, and who knows what's in another 20 to 30 years time. So on that note, I will leave you to present your presentation.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you to Peter as well. Before that impersonation of a ticker tape machine has absolutely made my day. I hope plenty of other people have enjoyed it as well. So good evening to everyone that's online. My name is Richard from Viewport 3, and we are very grateful today for the opportunity to promote and participate in some discussion. I'll work my way through these slides nice and quickly, because I am very keen to hear your questions at the end. As some of you will know, Viewport 3 are specialists in the 3D scanning sector, with our business entering its 4th profitable year in February. Today, we've been asked to give some detail of what it is we do and then examine some case studies. First, we'll take a look at what photogrammetry actually is for those that don't have any experience with it. The bulk of our presentation will then be around case studies, and then we'll touch on some post-scan activities before inviting your questions. So to kick off, what is it all about? Two very well-known early uses of photogrammetry are measurements of the pyramids in the late 1800s and battlefield assessments in the early 1900s. One photo, one calculation, and one result. Couldn't really be much easier. Modern 3D photogrammetry, however, uses millions, occasionally billions of pixels and calculations to produce a reliable 3D replica of the scanning subject, with accuracies measured in microns if that is what you need. It might be worth mentioning at this stage that unless otherwise tagged, all of the data sets shown in these slides are screenshots of raw 3D point clouds. And if you'd like to see any of them navigated live, just let us know. I'm glad to hook up with you on a virtual meeting and let you see that data. 3D photogrammetry is a very simple mathematical process. If we understand basic trigonometry, a single measurement is only an image and a notepad away. The full 3D version, however, does not fall into the category, of coffee break challenge. So we rely on the developments that came before us, as every engineering process does. To complete underwater 3D scanning from images, we need three things. First is trigonometry, which was invented 2,300 years ago by that sharp-nosed ancestor of ours. The date of the first underwater photograph is debated, although not very hotly, but we can call that 130 years ago. CPU power has been available for a long time, but in maybe the last 10 years or so, we've seen it become much more affordable. Putting a point cloud on a screen, however, is not normally the end requirement in our industry. After the scan, we need to analyze and interrogate. In this image, we're seeing a BX gasket being compared to its original shape, which did have a straight edge at one point in time. This is a comparison between the actual shape and CAD, and can be seen better on this slide as we compare the profile from the CAD version to the actual profile. Photogrammetry does not care about the size of something in the slightest. This would be one of our smaller scan targets. And the subsea structures would tend to be among the larger pieces of hardware that we've scanned for technical reasons. So that is photogrammetry. It's very flexible. Works under a microscope, and it also works through a telescope. If we can bounce light off of an object, we can record it in 3D. On to some of our case studies now. I've tried to mix them up a bit in case any of the audience listened to our recent presentations in an effort to keep things a little bit fresh. We're going to start off with 3 projects in some depth. In 2018, we were invited by a UK operator to discuss a challenge at the interface between hawse pipes and mooring lines. This is a digital photograph simply to show the challenges posed by the location of the anomalies, and as you can see, very hard up against the shoulder there. We were then told that 3 companies had tried and failed to collect measurement data, and that this effort was their last attempt before taking more drastic action. So, challenge accepted, our confidence prevailed, and we were awarded the project. Again, another digital still image, purely as an example of the quality of data we need for tight tolerance tasks such as these. This is a downscaled version of a 20 megapixel photograph taken at a mooring link. As you can imagine, the original can be zoomed into for days, and this is the photographic quality that we really need under tight tolerances. For the operational phase, we designed a system to enable capture of the mooring links and provide a full inspection report on the depths of the fretting, as well as the remaining bar stock. This was proved on shore in front of the client prior to mobilization. What you're seeing on the screen there is a very small deviation analysis on one of the frets on that mooring line. We then devised a new reverse engineering workflow to alleviate the fact that some of the anomalies were obscured by the hawse shoulder, as you saw in the photographs. As you can see here, some depths were as shallow as 1 millimeter, so cloud density and accuracy was absolutely critical during the project. More typically, the anomalies were around 3 or 4 millimeters deep, having a significant effect on the expected life of the mooring lines. We were glad to collaborate with the operator and the certifying authority during the reporting phase to make sure that the way the data was reported on was fully understood by all parties, and that was a very good exercise for us, helping us understand what the likes of Lloyd's and DNV are actually looking for. Again in 2018, we were invited to propose a solution to assist with a repair clamp design. During this diver project, we were able to capture data accurate to under 1 millimeter, and we also identified an undocumented liner which had been fitted. And we also detailed the dimensions and the relationship between the members. As you can see here from the detail of the weld, the data collected was beyond that which was demanded by the fabrication method, and that is absolutely the right side of accuracy to be on. Screenshots like this are a great acid test. We all have experience at looking at these types of objects, and it should look like you expect it to, especially in the small scale like that. There would be no problem counting the ripples on these weld beads or performing an inspection of the weld just from the point cloud. The wraparound design used in this project is exactly how it sounds. The data is issued for use in the client's own CAD system, allowing a design to be wrapped around the 3D scan data, and clash checking can then be performed virtually and immediately. As with similar projects, we were very pleased to hear that the resulting clamp fitted first time, which, as I understand it, is not very common when repair clamps are being applied. The last of our in-depth case studies relates to some curious pitting of a platform leg in the North Sea in late 2020. During a scheduled inspection, some unusual pitting was identified at the leg of a jacketed structure. The job was actioned by us as a remote support project because the travel restrictions of last year had recently come into place. So we were able to verify the data remotely and complete the job to the client specification. Of particular interest was the depth of the pits, and it is important to us that the way we display data suits our customers' needs. So as usual, we were happy to collaborate with them to see how they would like the data displayed. An ability to cut the 3D data is very helpful during projects like these and enables a very straightforward reporting method, which we believe promotes a more inclusive discussion with your colleagues. We'll now take a look at some more summarized case studies, just little data sheets if you like. This was a conductor guide, another repair clamp, and another wraparound design project. We were asked by the designers to further detail the weld cap locations once they had seen the quality of the point cloud, and some of these were as low as 1 or 2 millimeters. Very tight stuff. During a previous legacy video project, we confirmed to a repeat client of ours that one of their conductors had multiple anomalies, several of which were very significant. This led to a return to site to perform a purposed scanning project and collect high-end information. Our report included crack tracing, the measurement of the tapering effects as that conductor had taken damage, and the clash points between the conductor and the guide. We also performed a virtual clash check of the current clamp design, which proved very useful to the designers. Slightly different sector here, and when our client has a nuclear answer, the answer to the request is always yes. We reconstructed the USS Drennan archaeological site in 3D following a collaboration between our customers and the relevant authorities. Great story behind this very humbling job and very well covered in the press and journal if you're interested to learn any more about it, probably just by searching USS Drennan. Interestingly, one of the purposes of this data was to apply the VR possibility in museums and essentially allow people to walk around on the seabed and examine this archaeological site as if they were down there in a dive suit. Very impressive stuff. Our client for this task challenged his paperwork that was issued alongside these cradles. He had brought the radius of the cradle into question. The operator finally agreed to have them 3D scanned, and we were able to show that the radius was not as stated and that the reels would not fit. Not something you want to find out when you're offshore, but within a day of the request, we had scanned the unit and issued a report detailing the differences between the hardware and the drawing supplied. And that enabled the fabricator to proceed and modify for offshore use. With the rise in wind farm IRM requirements over the last few years, we've also simplified the process of scanning sacrificial anodes during annual inspections. These are now captured in a matter of minutes with a comprehensive data sheet issued for each anode. This is of huge benefit when comparing the CP system design info to its actual performance, and of course to the results of the following years where required if some anodes are performing particularly badly. Another mildly urgent job here for a new customer of ours in the Norwegian sector last year. For this task, we reported on the details of the sea tube distances, diameters, and angular relationship. This demonstrated that replacing the missing CAD information is more efficient than any trial and error methods. The pitch, roll, and yaw that we were able to detail for the client went a long way in helping them with that clamp design, and they returned to us just a few weeks later, actually. This is the last of the case studies. Contrary to this image, that line should not be buried. We performed this 3D scanning task for an asset in offshore Angola, and we were able to detail the characteristics of the failure as well as the crack that had resulted at the FTA end. Quite a challenging task, but the ROV team were fully switched on and quite easily coached into collecting some very usable data. So now that we have our 3D data sets in hand, we would call that the halfway point. It's now time to use them and extract genuine value from what we've collected. And this is where CAI analysis and interrogation techniques come in, CAI standing for computer-aided inspection. It is critical that the software deployed is modern and it suits the type of data that you're trying to look at. It is also critical that the software does not introduce errors of its own making, which is something that we've seen with some of the older packages. Cutaway views of data are very popular for obvious reasons. A customer of ours who had no capabilities in 3D data requested that we depict this spool piece in a series of slices, simultaneously detailing the magnitude of the blistering and any ovality issues that might have been present. Allow the customer to fully understand the geometry of the spool whilst deciding whether or not to reuse it. As we've already seen, 3D scanning offers the ability to wrap your virtual design around a copy of the object in question. Here, we are further highlighting weld seams and their heights for the designer. This customer also found value in a more efficient install campaign, which is exactly the reason that they performed the scan. The 3D data can also be used to bring out otherwise invisible features simply by asking different questions of the applied intelligence. This image is from a pre-designed scan, but by asking different questions of the 3D interrogation software, we can bring out the weld detail and easily identify the seams that make up this hull. This customer also found value in a more efficient offshore campaign. I'll just slide back and forth so you can see how it's able to draw that information out, which would otherwise be pretty invisible. This is a conductor clamp from a legacy footage task carried out in 2018. In this view, it is displaying the details as an example of the uncleaned areas and offers options in analysing the volume and the weight of the marine growth. The original query itself, however, related to clamp liner movement, and we were able to provide some good answers for the customer on that occasion. Manipulation of normal images also contains value, and using CAI techniques that show that depict the start and end of the crack, we can see that the markings here by the diver are ever so slightly out. And that's going to hinder any future propagation calculations or deviation mapping. With errors such as these, we leave ourselves in a position where a future, more accurate inspection would be forced to report that a crack had shrunk, and that's just going to remove any credibility from your process and your reporting. As with most companies, as you can imagine, we've pivoted in very unexpected ways over the past year or so, with remotely managed captures being actioned in every project that was due to kick off when the travel restrictions came into place. No one's request went unanswered. Our online 3D viewer will be released very soon, and we believe that this will add yet more value to the 3D scanning projects. This scene in particular, shown here, will be subjected to a dive campaign this summer, and the client is aiming to issue the data in the viewer to the entire dive team and allow them to fly around the job site at their leisure on whatever level of computing hardware they may have. Basic laptops will be absolutely fine. We are also adding to the capabilities of our own and everyone else's micro ROVs by producing a suite of purpose-designed lightweight cameras, and have also been asked to look at drop camera versions for caissons, J-tubes, and some other hard-to-reach spaces. This is also starting to happen with industrial ROVs as well, and we're currently responding to several requests to provide subsea and topside photogrammetry kits that can remain on the vessels and be used to scan whenever and wherever they feel like it. We'll be happy to send these slides on, just let us know, so don't worry about reading the service list. I'm more than happy to provide the presentation. We have always believed in the value of high quality subsea 3D scanning, and it's great to have this validated by industry over the last 3 years. This puts us in a position where we can invest in the company, improve and add to our services, and continue to increase the conservative estimate of £12 million in savings for our customers since the formation of our business. Our customers now place full trust in the geometry we report back to them, allowing them to negate contingency plans and the understanding that the data will be absolutely correct. And this, we believe, is the primary reason for our long list of demanding but returning customers. When the world opens up again, we'd be glad to supply the coffees and understand some of your challenges a little bit better, and we can be found just outside Aberdeen off the A90. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen. Happy to answer any questions, but if you'd rather ask them offline, no problem at all. Just get in touch with us. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Richard. I found that very interesting. I've had the fortune over the last couple of weeks, actually a month or so, to get really a little bit more knowledgeable about subsea photogrammetry, but it's still I feel I have a lot to learn, and I feel hopefully there's a lot of people out there that will gain something from what you're telling us this evening. I've got a number of questions from some of the viewers. The first one actually is just my one. I mean, it kind of harks a little bit back to Peter's talking about Oceanfix and how he started that. You started a new business yourself. How long did it take to go from that meeting with your colleague Chris to actually getting something out there and working for a client? 14
months between the formation of the business and putting our survival suits on to go offshore. It wasn't something that the industry had ever heard of before. That first job, my poor colleague had the client essentially on his shoulder for the entire campaign, but as soon as we started to produce the results offshore, everyone relaxed, and we were left to our own devices, because it's a high quality 3D scan. You can see that what you're looking at is right, and yeah, so that was a very proud day for us.
But it's interesting you say that there weren't many other people doing that at the time. Now there are. Actually, it's quite a competitive marketplace for you. I would say a few other companies doing something similar, but each one having their idiosyncrasies. As deliverable is something a little bit different. A few questions based around your presentation then now.
Yeah.
You've referenced to legacy video a few times during your slides. Could you detail this further, and does it always work?
No, it doesn't. Legacy video has, I believe we've completed 5 projects where we've been able to deliver what we would call a valuable result to the customer through legacy video. And some of those solutions were very, very valuable indeed in terms of operational expenditure. We've had a couple of them that just haven't produced any usable results, is what we would call it. If it's not of any engineering value, then we wouldn't really call it a deliverable. One of them was an ad hoc piece of ROV footage that was taken, very low density camera, but disappointingly, one of them video sets actually came from an outfit that was deployed to do the 3D scanner.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very flexible technology, and the legacy video, it does solve problems for people.
Okay. So another question from Michael Larkey. How do you control and calculate errors subsea? How do you deal with poor visibility, especially, which is obviously something we have to deal with on a daily basis?
Yeah, that we've heard that excuse many a time. If you can't deal with the matter that's suspended in the water, underwater, then you shouldn't be in control of that camera, to be quite honest with you. It's not uncommon. We know it's going to be there. It's always there. So yeah. You put your photographic skills into play and you remove it. We're not there to focus on particles. We're looking to focus on the object.
I presume is a factor of the accuracy that you gain the amount of time that you spend taking images. I mean, if you take images over a 2-day period, they're going to be far more accurate than a 1 day. Is that a fair assessment? Or
if it took 2 days, I would quit, Stuart. That would be way too long for anything that I can think of, to be honest with you.
No, but
the time is, it's not as important as the quality that you take back, and there's no substitute for a digital still camera. If I could maybe take 10 photographs with a high-end camera, and then in order to get the same amount of coverage, you might need 5 or 6 minutes of video, which once you broke that down into frames is a much more difficult data set to deal with. So the key is to get it right first time and deploy the right type of camera.
So Julian Bell was asking whether how you deal with camera movement. I mean, how do you do that? That is a factor.
Camera movement in what sense?
Well, I presume if you're mounted on the ROV and there's excessive movement of the camera, does that have an adverse effect on the quality of the photo, the final result?
I'm not sure what he means by movement of the camera. The ROV is absolutely dynamic. We've never had any issues with the camera being moving independently, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, the movement is so slow, but there's another question. Are we talking millimeter accuracy? And I think you referenced it on one of your slides there, but we are talking millimeter accuracy with what you do here.
Absolutely. There's no limit to what photogrammetry can achieve. It's just a matter of how far you're willing to go to collect data. But when you're working in the subsea engineering environment, things aren't built to the micron. So in most cases, it's not applicable. And we occasionally tell customers that maybe the accuracy that they're looking for isn't quite required. But when you're on site, our aim at that point is to beat the accuracy statement that we've been given. If you ask for under 1 millimeter or under 0.1 mil, it's going to take a little bit longer. So it's important that our customers realize they're demanding that for the right reasons and not for some spurious sort of misunderstanding.
Yeah. You alluded also to having to evolve because of COVID, remote operations. And what are the factors that led to and limitations of a successfully remotely managed scanning task that you mentioned?
The limiting factors are time and your upload connection. So some marine contractors have better upload capabilities than others, but yeah, it worked in every single circumstance. And all it really needs is the focus of the ROV team.
Yeah.
If the ROV team don't take it seriously, the company man maybe will readjust their attitude, and then we'll start to get high quality data. But the concept that it's you know, go down and take a bunch of photographs, it's just a bit lacking, unfortunately.
Just proper planning again.
Absolutely, do it scientifically and maximize the technology that you're using.
Yeah. I have another question here. Nuno, gracias. Do you use navigation data? Take that into account in the large 3D reconstructions?
Yeah, if you need it. Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. It comes from the same places that all the other 3D data comes from, which is ultimately from the vessel via the ROV. So if that data is correct, then we will be able to apply it, geolocate it, and apply orientations, which is one of the things that we were very keen to have in our online viewer, so that people can understand the direction they're viewing something from.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's probably about it now. There are other questions, but I would encourage you to maybe go onto the Discord and Discord forum, and there is a lot of people there. I think we're still at a very high number of viewers, so that's always very gratifying to know that people are tuning in at the moment. But Richard, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. It's been very entertaining, very informative. I think that's what it's all about, isn't it? So thank you very much for your time, and
no problem.
We'll move on to Grant now. What I would say in the interim is a couple of things worth mentioning from our perspective, from a NOSP perspective. The next planned event is on the 24th of February, so put that one in your diaries. And worth mentioning also that for the Scottish Hydrographic Office, the Hydrographic Society in Scotland, apologies, we'll be holding their online AGM on the 27th of January, so barely 6 days' time. So get that one in your diaries as well. So we'll move on to our final presentation this evening, which is again based on photogrammetry. I mentioned just now that there are a few different players in the marketplace at the moment, but all doing something different. So I think it's definitely worth having Grant here. He can explain a little bit what Savant does, and a little bit of a bio here, because I was very interested to hear reading about Grant's previous life, but I thought we could actually just talk about his experiences in New York applying standoff laser technologies to biological warfare in agent detection. That sounded like a very interesting presentation in itself. But we will crack on now, Grant, and allow you to present your company to the viewers. All the best.
Okay, well, that's me off mute now. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thank you very much, everyone, for the opportunity to present this evening. I would like to go and present, well, the title of the topic is A Brief Case of Brief Case Studies. We get into quite a lot of different fields out with the oil and gas industry. So what I'd like to do is really present as broad a range of instances where we have applied photogrammetry, and particularly that we've done using our own GP3D, which is our general purpose 3D subsea scanner. A lot of the work that we've been doing recently has been concentrated on FPSO decommissioning, so I've really just modified one of our existing presentations. So I'm going to start off with a quick overview of Savant Subsea, just to let people understand where we've come from and where we're going. I started up Savant in 2003. I was 24, did it with £50 and set up a company. So a lot of, I can certainly relate to the first presentation and a lot of the more sort of business related side of that presentation. We are now very much a specialist survey contractor, but also a developer of solutions as well. Our biggest market is still in the oil and gas sector, where we have developed, in addition to photogrammetry, subsea 3D laser scanning equipment, and then additional optical technologies, which are in themselves a variation on a theme of photogrammetry, using stereo cameras, SLAM mapping, which is self-localization and mapping. And then more recently, over the last couple of years, we have been really moving beyond 3D imaging, laser scanning, to look at how we can evolve and make use of new technologies such as artificial intelligence, and also augmented environments for working in poor visibility areas. In the oil and gas industry in itself, we really do come across every single aspect of subsea operations, whether it be platform inspections, pipeline work, DIMCON, and then everything across the fields of installation through to ongoing integrity management, and then finally into decommissioning, and even monitoring sites after they have been decommissioned. We don't just work underwater, we also do work in the topsides in air environment too. So just to wet the whistle, start off just with some exemplar 3D scans of the kind of work that we get into. We do work across a variety of scales. One of the real values of photogrammetry is that it can work at the microscopic domain. Often we can put together an optical system to give us a magnification for working close up. In the microscopic domain, the finesse of the 3D data that comes back is exceptionally high. What you're seeing here is a conductor clamp, and we were asked to look at this by one of our clients earlier on this year. And it really, I think a key point to mention here is that this isn't just a fancy photograph, this is actually a full CAD model. And I'll move on to the next one, because on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is the result of taking the CAD engineering point cloud data on the left, and we can texture map it. We can add any form of data from the images themselves and create a 3D virtual world. This is basically part of the single elevation of the platform. We're looking at conductors, we're looking at structural deformation. You can see there's a central member there that's missing, and some components of clamping repairs which have been applied. And we'll come back to this one in particular later. Just I think I've got a couple better models. So I think just because of time constraints, I'll move on from this one. But the premise of the company is the right data powers the right decisions. If you've got a structure which has been subject to damage, you really do need to have the combination of the best quality 3D data to understand exactly to what extent damage has occurred. I'll just move on to this one. This is actually, just in passing, this is actually one of the first subsea laser scanners that we actually worked in Norway with it. So I'll move on from there and get back into photogrammetry. So the highlights of photogrammetry is that effectively we're creating a photorealistic digital twin engineering model. And the power of photogrammetry is that you create models which are exceptionally repeatable with high precision and accuracy. And the value of that is it means you can go back to the same asset year after year and look to see the progression of degradation, whether it be through mechanical wear, sulfate reducing bacteria, that sort of thing. And really it's just another tool in the box for us alongside the other optical techniques and also our laser tools. So I'll deal with photogrammetry as a single strand here, but what we have found with it is it is a very effective means of creating a 3D model underwater. we still feel that subsea laser scanning, and we can show 3D data of the same objects collected by both techniques. The laser scanning still is the ultimate in being able to look at certain forms of damage. But the real value of photogrammetry is in the versatility and the flexibility of the equipment that you need to carry it out effectively. 3D-GP is our own software and hardware-based solution. I won't go too much into the details of it, but we have really centered on two main units. We've got the workhorse, which is this desktop-based system in largely orange, and that is really, it's a very fast tool to run through all the calculations needed on a frame-by-frame basis from video footage in order to go and create a 3D model. And the unit on the bottom is just an Odroid XU4, which is a credit card size computer which has its own graphics accelerator on it, and we can leverage that ability to create 3D, real-time 3D generating solutions within our own cameras on a module basis. So what we really need in order to go and do photogrammetry is really just a video-based or a photographic digital stills input. And certainly this year, we've seen exactly the same thing. Clients are coming to us with terabytes of data on bags and boxes of hard drives. We've had a couple of instances this year where we've taken video footage live over the internet, whether that be on good KU band networks with full video rate data, or taking intermittent frames and uploading them to our workhorse. The system has been designed not to just simply work on monocular camera feeds, and I'll go into some of the terminology in the next couple of minutes, but also to accept footage from our stereo cameras and also our higher order multi-camera system. So we really, we divide photogrammetry, really take a horizontal line across the screen here. Monocular photogrammetry, we separate out from both the stereo and the multi-view work. But what you can achieve with monocular photogrammetry is very simply measurements using a single camera. Our top right is one of our vector cameras, and we produce a range of these which we've optimized, everything down to the shape of the lenses, which we get custom fabricated. And we have a range of CCD camera modules, CMOS camera modules, which range from the high speed, operating at around about we actually have a new module which is at 400 frames per second, to very large area capture. They operate at a lower speed, but we have a single camera now which is working at 85 megapixels. Just a brief summary of what is photogrammetry. There is the old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and what we can do with these 4 pictures is we pass it through our computer, and we can detect features within each of the images. And what we do from image to image is we match the features between the images and plot how the relationship between each other from frame to frame and within frame change. And then we have an algorithm which allows us to create a 3-dimensional reconstruction. I always present this as a micrometer because it's not a perfect world. There are some drawbacks to the technology. I like seeing the data in an unedited manner. This example here, you can pick up the tip of a caliper here, but there are areas here showing in white, and these are experimental concerns that you need to be aware of whenever you're undertaking a photogrammetry operation. In these particular areas here, you've got signal dropout, and it's largely, well, actually, it's entirely due to the fact there was insufficient light reaching the camera during those moments. So the benefits of monocular photogrammetry is that just about every ROV, towfish, drop frame tends to have at least one video camera on it. So there is also a huge amount of heritage video data already within the industry. And we have actually many examples, even within this presentation, of heritage footage, whether it be from standard definition or high definition footage. An additional benefit of monocular work is that it is actually the performance of and the capabilities of photogrammetry are improving as the cameras used to collect the data improve. So as we move towards faster, better architectures of cameras and larger arrays, what we see is an improvement in the quality of the 3D models that we can generate. Another benefit is that in addition to the 3D model itself, we can actually reconstruct the passage of the camera. So that is a combination of both its position, but also its attitude at any moment in time during the collection process. So I promised some case studies. Really, I think the underlying sort of message that I would like to get across is that really the applications for photogrammetry are endless. If you can photograph it, you can create a 3D model of it. And whether it is within the oil and gas, whether it is supporting marine and environmental science, the military, it is a wonderful tool to deploy. So I've divided this up into sections, and I was just going to give a quick overview of some of the work that we've been done. And it's really just an opportunity to show some of the sort of data sets that we've been able to put together. It's our first ever project, actually, was in latter half of 2003, when we were asked to look at a pipeline anchor strike in the Gulf of Mexico. I haven't got that, but this is just a partial scan over the top of a water injection line from the Gulf of Mexico at the time. But really, it's to show that the geometry here is very good, and also that we can pick up areas of corrosion and deformation that way. We have been doing a lot of work trying to minimize the requirement for, or certainly not minimize the requirement, but extend the capability of GVI surveys. And this is an example of how we are able to apply photographic footage from looking at spool pieces which are connected to wellheads. In this model here, we've created a 3D model of a spool piece coming out from a concrete mattress, and we're able to plot both the topography of the adjacent seabed, so areas in blue here colored to indicate areas of greater depth. And you can see elements of marine growth on top of the spool piece, but also the point of connection. Whether it is looking at pipeline areas or looking at scour development around mud mats. This is another example. This is one that was created using legacy standard definition video footage, and again, very much able to resolve the presence of little stones in the seabed around the mud mat. But again, you can see areas of scour developing up on the side there. Really, it's adding value to what you can achieve using the most basic of video cameras. We have been, this is really a 360-degree walk around of that spool piece that I showed you earlier, not colored to show depth. And again, just really illustrating, you can really see exactly what it is that was down on the seabed. But this is a 3D CAD model, so you can go in, process the data afterwards, and make all sorts of measurements. In addition to looking at the pipe product itself, we have done some work looking at, this one was actually supporting decommissioning, which was a reverse installation. So the client wanted to understand what the conformation of the concrete mattresses was across a crossing, and the whole idea was to render that, to get as good an appreciation of what lay on the seabed. We can see the rope loops either side of the concrete mattress, and this is used to assist an ROV construction vessel in recovering that data. And so we can show it as a series of photographs, but we can also show it as a 3D walk around. So you can see the adjacent mattresses. You can see some of the yellow painted markings, and also the distribution of sediment that's built up over the area. So whether it is a high quality color reproduction, through our software we can actually re-display that as a topographic color-coded map. Other things that we've applied it to also include, this is some work that we did looking at trying to support some spool piece metrology, and this was really just an example of being able to actually record the transponder bucket and stand itself. So moving on from cables, pipelines and umbilicals, this is a lot more of the sort of work that we're getting into at the moment. If we start off with looking at conductors, we're able to stand back from an area of interest, and this was captured in fairly clean water, but just the capacity of the technology to be able to capture not just the immediately concerned area, but also its relationship to the stub and also the leg to which it was attached. Other work that we've been involved in is looking inside caissons. We have our own ROV that has high definition video cameras, laser profilers, etc. And this is some test piece work that we've done to render areas of welds. So again, not a photograph, 3D model, and you can pick up some of the spattered weld that's been applied to this test plate. And sort of dimensions that we're involved, that we're looking at here from the top to the bottom of the weld, it's only about 5 mil. And it really is a case of choosing the optics to match the requirements of the project. In terms of some of the projects that we've been asked to go and look at, this is an example where one of our clients came to us asking us to validate the dimensions of stubs used to hold conductor guides. So this is the kind of environment that we're used to working with, heavy marine growth. We were supplied with an HD. Now, to us, we would consider HD to be 1K, 2K video footage. Our own cameras are up at 20 megapixel and 85 megapixels. So a lot of the data that we're going to show you here is actually, especially with legacy footage, nowhere near the true capabilities of the technology. But here's a 3D rendering of that same conductor going through the guide funnel. And what we were able to find is that once we had a nice point cloud, we were able to rotate the model through 90 degrees, effectively peering through the conductor from the top. And what we saw within the conductor on this 3D model was a very nice, clean external surface. And when we looked through the video, we realized that actually the conductor is stroking up and down through the guide, perhaps due to heat expansion and contraction, we're not sure, but and also rotation, but it gave us a very nice external surface here to use as a datum. I'll talk about that just present after I've gone through some of these case studies, but one of the problems with monocular photogrammetry is that it inherently give you the capacity to make distance measurements. It's very good for making geometrical measurements, but it's not actually a true digital twin in the sense of being able to go into it and do full 3D measurements. In order to do that, you need to have some sort of an indication of scale. Or, as in this instance, we were able to curve fit the internal surface of what was effectively a cylinder, and we went back to the client to confirm what that dimension should be. And in essence, what we ended up doing was scaling the model to convert it from a dimensionless 3D point cloud to an actual dimensioned, measurable digital twin. Other projects that we've been involved in, this is an example that we posted up on LinkedIn recently. This is an example where one of our clients came to us with some standard definition video footage of a gouge which had occurred on the side of a conductor. And we were asked to try and make a three-dimensional model of it. So we did, we applied some scaling based on some measurements and of known objects within the video footage, and it allowed us to compute the depth of actual penetration within the metal content of the conductor. Sort of stuff that we're getting into, pardon me, a lot of the applications that we get involved in at the moment are things looking at components that have been damaged, dropping off. This is an example of a conductor that has been supported with in location just as part of a repair. We've also seen the same sort of methodology applied to the bottom. What this allows us to do is to capture the site at a moment in time in order to plan for more effective repairs. And again, it's not just the capacity to be able to look at small areas. This is a 3D model of a conductor. This is the same one, and we've taken frames from video footage along the complete length of the conductor, picking up the marine growth, but also the geometry of the conductor, looking at areas of deformation, really just to identify if there's any additional remediation work needed. Where are we? Come on. In decommissioning, there are additional applications that we've been involved in. This is an example of a lifting point. This was part of the structure when it went onto the seabed, and we were asked to recreate a 3D model of it. Again, from standard definition legacy, heritage footage, and these are the sort of results that we're able to come back with. And also looking at pipelines which have been severed from platforms. This is an example where a diamond wire saw was used to sever the end of a pipe, and I think that was a 3-inch methanol injection line. And we've looked at larger areas, really just using video footage of opportunity to create models like this and provide records for submissions to regulators. Again, areas which are important to the regulators when decommissioning structures. This is some video footage converted into a 3D model where we have looked at providing determinations of drill cuttings which have deposited on the top of the platforms. And in addition to that, you can see some really nice examples of saltwater corals as well. And for this particular application, measuring drill cuttings is fine, but there are also environmental applications available for people who are concerned with understanding the impact of subsea infrastructure on the growth of subsea species. We do look at environmental science as well. This takes us away from the oil and gas arena. So this is an example of a very large complex siphonophore, which is very much a filamentous marine organism. And again, we can take video footage and create a nice measurable 3D models of it, capturing all the contorted sort of structures there. There are some of the videos, we do see some noise creeping in, but by and large, it's pretty good. FPSOs are a subject of interest to us at the moment, whether it be looking at the mooring systems and components to which mooring chains are docked onto and connected up to. So we see cheek plates here, and then also components of the fairlead assemblies. I'll just skip through some of these. It's actually nicer to look at it in as a full motion video, but it's not just the capacity to look at marine growth. It's also within this video footage here, you can pick up areas of surface damage and wear on the sides here in particular. And again, we can look at that and give an immediate determination of the depth of wear. But from campaign to campaign, we can go back and do differential measurements to show the progression of that. We've looked at mooring chains as well. This one was actually laser scanned, so I won't really spend too much time on it. But again, mooring chains, just examples of applications where we get asked to look at areas of wear and corrosion, etc. But then also it works on fiber rope as well. And again, it's really, if you've got a photograph of it, we can create a 3D model of it. I'll just skip on from here. Jackets themselves, this one is a video from really just a 3D model that we've made of anodes, and a little bit of a walk around, just showing the presence of marine growth on it. But again, we can do a cuboidal fit to this area of a point cloud to provide a determination of the dimensions and volume left. And ultimately, it takes out a lot of the subjectivity associated with the alternatives, which is to give an estimate of depletion on currently, I think it's 25% bins. Within jackets themselves, we look at areas of members themselves. Plenty of examples of these, whether it be single conductors and their attachments. We've also looked at much larger examples here as well. Just a final image from that data set. But then also looking at structures such as subsea pile sleeves. This is footage 3D model that was created using standard definition video footage. It's good enough to give you the capacity to do some fitting of primitive objects, so cubes, tubulars, spheres, some great definition on the anodes on the structure as well, and the points of attachment, and also from the top of the pile all the way down to the seabed. Some interesting aspects of the use of photogrammetry. This is the side of a storage facility, but what we can do with video footage is you can see the general path of the ROV as it travels from seabed to the top of the structure, and it raster scans effectively along the length of it. One of the values of photogrammetry, especially if you're able to go and perform it live, is that it shows up areas where the ROV actually hasn't visited. So these areas in black represent areas where there is no video data to give the client an understanding of what's going on. And if you're looking at areas like this where it's largely just structural plates and maybe the side of an anode, you know, that may not necessarily be have significant consequences, but certainly when you're looking at structures within here, it's important to be able to recognize that this data hasn't been collected and address that in field. Manifolds and Christmas trees. We've done 3D models all the way around the world. This is again standard definition video footage that we've turned into a 3D model. It actually looks better than standard definition here, but this is an example where we've taken a 1/4 megapixel video camera at close-up and then expanded the point cloud based by operating very closely to the surface. And here we have some framework protecting some pipe work and a nice 3D model of it, again based on these of standard definition video footage. I'll just do a 360 quickly. I'll just move on. So I'll ignore this one. This is looking at making 3-dimensional models of mine targets. That one is within wellheads. The examples I've shown you before are really what we would reference as being simplex models. This is an example where you have a single video file from a single video camera, and you run it through the system and create a nice 3D model. The trouble is that that doesn't really integrate very effectively with a modern GDI campaign. And to illustrate, I'm going to show you a selection of 4 images that we had to interpret 4 separate video files collected at 3 different times in the day using an observation ROV. And the reason why that is that this first video file was, the focus of the file was to look at the western attachment point of this member to this member. The second one was below it was to look at the central attachment point. And then the third one was to collect a video clip of an anomaly that had been identified on it. And then on the 4th video clip here, we were required to look at video footage from a work class ROV. So it's not that it just wasn't the same video camera, it wasn't even the same ROV collecting this data. So this is an example of a more complex situation where we've had to develop the software and the process to be able to identify the same features within different video clips that weren't even registered on the same, recorded using the same system. So once we've passed the videos through the system, we end up with, oops, it's a bit fast, the capacity to render 3D models like this. And this really is an example of where we don't really make any effort to do any additional cleaning of the noise out of this or of the data itself. It's just more than sufficient to be able to look at this, to stand back from the 3D point cloud and understand exactly what the geometry of all the members and structures are within that area of measurement. So there's a heritage dream here, which is that you know, it would be ideal if you could work with all the vast amounts of data that already exists. The problem that we found with it is that not every single video can actually be applied to this technology, largely because of the amount of compression that has been used in the past. We find that with particular MPEG compression technologies that the capacity to do feature tracking from frame to frame is actually degraded to the point where you lose confidence in it. And if the last video that I showed you was evidence enough, one of the problems with this kind of work is that actually not all video piloting footage has been recorded with photogrammetry in mind. So you do end up with areas where you might be missing video footage from one side of an area of interest, and it's not always possible to stitch it all together. And for us, with our data capture, if we're looking at monocular photogrammetry, we do really recommend the use of a high quality strobe. And the reason why we do that is to knock out the impact of ROV movement, particularly when you're working in splash zones where the vehicle can move through quite rapid attitude and position changes. And then finally, the last two areas here is one of the drawbacks of monocular work in particular is that you cannot get real-time visualization of dynamic targets. It really is a static representation of the area, and these are concepts that are addressed using higher order video techniques. And then I've already really addressed this scaling problem when, just to remind you that if you are collecting a point cloud using a monocular system, you have to have an object or a priori knowledge of a measured or measurable feature on the subject before you can use it for direct measurements. We'll move on from there because I suspect I've been longer than 20 minutes. So stereo multi-view photogrammetry really moves beyond the single camera work. This is some of our earliest work that we did in, I think it was about 2008. And this is an example of a micro ROV where we've really strapped together a rather Heath Robinson looking stereo camera system. And we've used this to, particularly within caissons, create 3D models of circumferential well blocks. Where we are at the moment is this idea of using multiple cameras. Our cameras all synchronize with each other. The benefit of stereo photogrammetry is really in the mathematics needed to support a 3D reconstruction. It is pretty much simple trigonometry by comparison with monocular-based work. The value of stereo photogrammetry is that you can perform real-time 3D visualizations. So if the scene is dynamic in front of your camera, you can actually measure the extent of movement. This is very valuable if you're looking at objects that have fallen loose and you're wanting to categorize the extent of motion. With stereo photogrammetry, we can also deploy real-time SLAM, and this is the capacity to make 3D models of the object, but also track the position of the ROV as it's making those measurements. Another advantage, and this is again, this is a solution to the problem of the scalability problem using monocular work, is through the calibration of a stereo camera, you no longer need to install scale bars on the objects that you're measuring. And what we found in moving to stereo work is we've been able to collect measurements with lower residuals, so it's a more accurate measurement. We have put together a variety of tools that we've deployed in field, some of them using really nothing more significant than taking 2 or 3 or 4 of our vector cameras and mounting them rigidly on a section of U-bend. This is an example of one that we put together for mounting in an ROV manipulator claw, and it works pretty well. This next slide is really an illustration of the basic premise of stereo photogrammetry, which is that you have 2 video channels, they're synchronized, and you look at an object from through both channels simultaneously. On the left-hand side here, you see dots color-coded in red. On the right-hand side, you see the same features. These are numerically important features. The computer determines these and then looks towards matching the features in front of the camera. And it means that you can create a point cloud that way instead of having to run through lots and lots of video footage. And again, this is a 3D model of a transponder beacon stand using stereo photogrammetry. And other forms of stereo imaging that we've developed. Up on the top, we've got our Vergence 3D scanner. and what we've done within here is integrated 2 very high definition video cameras, and also basic laser scanning capacity as well, and some onboard storage and some processing equipment. And where we are at the moment is really deploying the same sort of Vergence technology, the stereo camera arrangement, but we've integrated this into one of our micro ROVs and taking this to the oil and gas industry ourselves to perform measurements when required. And this is giving us greater flexibility than being reliant upon legacy data. I'm going to end it there. I've put up a QR code to the Savant website, so if anyone's interested, you'll get it there. Oops. Am I still here?
Yes, Grant, you are still here.
Okay.
We lost your picture about 10 minutes ago. We have just a still of you now. But thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. It's kind of captured a lot of what I was curious about for photogrammetry. I hope you're coming back and joining me. Grant, are you there?
I am still. I've not used this StreamYard before, so I'm trying to find the other window.
No problem. We're looking at the depths of the abyss there. You're black at the moment, but not a problem. Thank you. As I said, once again, very interesting in the respect of what you can do with the photographs. I've been challenged a little bit lately on understanding what to look for when checking and finding out the correct subcontractors or who are doing photogrammetry. But what are the kind of if a company is looking for to use a photogrammetry subcontractor, what are the kind of the prerequisites you would advise? I mean, you're talking HD, you're talking dual cameras as well, proprietary software. Do you do a lot of your own programming yourself, or is that off? Because I know that it is possible to buy off-the-shelf software. So, yeah, give me a little bit of a background on what are the optimal requirements for doing this kind of a work.
Okay, so in terms of software development, I started from the ground up, and I've done a lot of programming in C++.
Yeah.
And the real value of that is that it allows you to take on some of the, the Intel. Well, for us, we use the Intel technology because it gives us access to intrinsics, which really allow you to do a lot of this mathematics in a heavily parallelized manner. So in terms of being able to get the data quickly, what we've been able to do is separate out the data collection process from the data presentation software in particular. So if we're doing 3D modeling, we'll do the data capture using our own proprietary first principles developed fundamental maths. And then we take that point cloud, and what we're doing is we're using, AutoCAD, we're using a variety of other packages like Cloudcaster is one that you can't buy it unfortunately anymore, but we use third-party packages like that to help us to use the the renderings and all that sort of stuff. But if you're looking at what it is that it would be a good start is to understand what technology. Everything starts from the platform, everything starts from the front end, which is the camera. Yeah. So you need to understand how the optics perform. You need to understand an element of actually even the architecture of the camera itself electronically. Yeah. A lot of the legacy work that we do uses some of the sort of commercially available video cameras, but they're actually, when you go into the electronics, they're actually not the best way of going about it. There are other fundamental requirements for doing photogrammetry that you need to be very much aware of.
Do you have your own cameras, or are the ones you've just mentioned that they're not that great technology wise? So do you make your own?
Yes, so we started from the ground up, and it's the same as the laser scanners. We're a manufacturer of instrumentation. We used to sell them, but we've decided to just walk away from that market and actually apply our own technology and present it to the market ourselves. So the cameras, my previous background was very much heavily optical systems design. So we get lenses manufactured, everything from the front sapphire viewport on the camera through to the camera lenses themselves, and it's everything down to looking at how color is focused onto the camera, looking at aberrations, all these things. They're very important, and really to make optimum use of it, you need to have that sort of fundamental background to the technology and also the mathematics. So everything that we've done is an evolution from some work that was published. I mean, photogrammetry is not new, but applying computer technology, we take everything back to some papers that were published by IBM back in the 1980s. And we've evolved the mathematics. We've been very much aware of all the publications that appear in academia. We've really just tried to capture as many different angles of the technology and bring it under one house.
I'm impressed by that, actually, because it's like many things in this world, there is the high level and the low level, and you get various degrees of accuracy based on what you look. And I think in understanding the scope, or at least the client understanding the scope and knowing exactly what we're getting, I think that will lead to better results. Okay, I've got a number of questions, actually. Some of them came in before you started to talk about dual optics, but from Mikhail Lucky, a good question. How do you calculate refraction errors when using multiple cameras?
Right. So that's a very, very much an extensive and very expensive topic.
Yeah.
So for the camera, what we do is we create a 3D model, and we use it's ray tracing software. So we've got a fundamental model of a camera in the viewport on the front, and through our calibration process, we can actually compute all the optical parameters and reconstruct a 3D model of it. When we're working with other people's cameras, we apply that same technology, that same process, so that we end up with a theoretical derivation of not just the description of the camera array, but also all the optics in front of it. And that can also include the medium that you're imaging through.
Right. Okay, well, I hope that answered Mikhail's question. I've got several more. This one from Andrew Doherty. Can you give a high-level overview of how long the processing of pipeline cable umbilical product takes? Is it labor-intensive, or are parts of the processing workflow automated?
Where we are now is everything is automated. So my involvement, we've gone heavy on. So I mentioned earlier the use of technologies to really upman us. We're very light on personnel, but we don't do anything. Everything is left to the computer now to be able to go in and pull out the necessary features and then create the 3D reconstruction.
Okay, good, thank you. Another question here. Quality checking of the acquired data is quite important, depends a lot on the survey to do. Are you able to provide a rough 3D result during survey missions? So I presume on the fly offshore.
So we can do, with the stereo cameras, we can produce not just the point cloud, but we can also provide a determination of error budget. And that's on a pixel by pixel basis. Sorry, not a pixel. That's actually on a point by point basis within the point cloud. When you are doing heritage work or monocular work, what we tend to do is we'll actually process the entire cloud first, and then we will look towards error propagation. It is very important, but we do that in our process. We create the 3D model, and then we compute how those errors stack up as they travel through the model. And it's a very important aspect of the project, because if for every image that you match from image to image, if you do have say 40 odd transitions from different images, those error budgets will increase after time, and you need to be aware of them, and you need to be able to kick them out the point cloud, or yeah, you just have to be able to be aware of them.
Right. Okay, and probably a last one, I imagine. This was from Kurt Jacobson. Could you say how much time it takes? So this is a direct comparison with two acquisition scopes. So how much time it would take you to make a 3D photo from, say, 20 seconds with a video monocular technology, and the same for stereo? Is there, yeah.
For stereo, it's real time, so we can process up to, I think we're roughly about 80 frames a second.
Okay.
On the stereo system. On the monocular, 4 seconds.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's.
We're not talking long periods of time anyway here.
No, you're not. So we've towards the end of last year, we actually did an upgrade of our system. So the orange unit that you've seen the photograph of just now, we did a time trial with it against its predecessor, which was we ended up, I think it was about 40 to 50 times faster. So
okay.
200 frames, HD, 2K. What is that? Say 25 frames a second, 400 images. It really is not long at all.
Yeah. There has definitely been a theme this evening, not just photogrammetry, and Peter alluded to some dimensional control, obviously high accuracy. Staying current is challenging in this day and age. Things evolve very quickly. We've seen that in very short space of time. So where do you see subsea inspection ROV operations going over the next few years? Well, you're having to stay very mobile, I presume, to keep one step ahead of your competitors.
Yes, so we're a very lightweight company, and there are some very, very large, very well-resourced competitors that we have to be nimble and agile about. Photogrammetry, laser scanning, these are two important but not dominating parts of the company now. A lot of what we're doing is deploying very much artificial intelligence-based solutions towards leveraging compute power to replacing human requirements for survey work. We've been awarded a project actually just last month where one of our AUVs is going to be used without certainly without a large human presence with it, to go and do a survey of a structure in the North Sea. And that is very much a case of video-based interpretation using artificial intelligence. Yeah. And the idea is really just to be able to do a lot more, a lot faster, and using just compute power.
Yep, that's the way things are going, and very much well. Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I would recommend that you jump over to the Discord chat room, where there are quite a number of other questions coming in for you that are way over my head. So at least you can get a chance to chat with some like-minded thinking people. But yes, I think that's probably going to wind it up for this evening now. On the screen again, you can see our sponsors. Grant's now disappeared away. I would just like to say thank you very much for your presence this evening. We've had, I think, probably a record number of viewers. We were 3 figures, as I mentioned earlier. That's never happened before, as far as I know. And we were still up at very high numbers towards the end now. So thank you very much for staying with us for the duration. I hope this was interesting. Hopefully the presentations will go up on our website anyway, on NOSP, and no doubt on the Scottish version as well. And in the meantime, I just say stay safe and try to stay sane as well. I think more than anything in these current times, and try to look after yourself. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you once again.